The great palace ship of the Zenari Empire floated like a jewel in the endless black of space. Its walls were made of living crystal that shimmered with a rainbow glow, as if the stars themselves bent to honor the alien royals who ruled from within. Inside, the throne hall was crowded with nobles from many worlds, tall creatures with silver eyes, scaled warriors with armor that shone like fire, and feathered diplomats who carried themselves with elegant pride. At the very center of this dazzling court stood one man who looked completely out of place, Captain Ethan Cross of Earth. He was only human, shorter, plainer, and far less decorated than the nobles around him. His dark blue diplomatic uniform looked simple beside the flowing robes and jeweled crowns of the alien lords. But his steady eyes and calm stance gave him a quiet strength, even as whispers spread through the chamber. "Is that the human?" one alien hissed. "Fragile species," another sneered. "Why would the princess waste words on him?" Ethan ignored the comments. He had been trained for this. Earth had only recently joined the galactic community, and he was sent as one of its first ambassadors. His mission was to keep peace, make alliances, and prove that humanity could stand as equals among the stars. But what happened next was not in any training manual. The crystal throne opened with a soft hum, and Princess Liara of the Zenari Empire stepped forward. She was radiant. Her long silver hair shimmered like starlight, and her eyes burned with a violet fire that could silence a room with a single glance. Every noble bowed low except for Ethan, who gave a respectful but firm nod. He had been told humans did not bow to foreign rulers, and he would not dishonor Earth by doing so now. Liara studied him for a long moment. Then, to the shock of the entire court, she raised her voice and declared, "Captain Ethan Cross of Earth, I give you one choice. You will marry me, or your people will be erased from the stars." The chamber exploded with gasps and shouts. Nobles turned their heads, some laughing in disbelief, others horrified. A marriage proposal to a human? It was madness. Ethan froze. He had faced dangerous negotiations before, but never anything like this. His mind raced. Was this a joke? A trap? Or some kind of alien custom he did not understand? "You will marry me," Liara continued, her voice sharp as crystal, "or Earth will be struck from our protection. Without our shield, your homeworld will not survive a single season against rival empires. The choice is simple: human." Ethan took a slow breath, keeping his face calm even though his heart pounded. "Princess Liara," he said carefully, "marriage was not part of the agreement Earth made with your empire. May I ask why you have chosen this ultimatum?" The court erupted again. Some shouted that he was insolent. Others mocked the human for daring to question the princess. But Liara raised her hand, silencing the hall. "You wish to know why?" she said, her eyes narrowing. "Because my court doubts me. They whisper that I am too young, too untested, too soft to rule. By choosing you, a human, a species considered weak, I show them my will is unbreakable. If I command even a fragile creature to stand at my side, they will see that no tradition, no opinion, no law binds me. My rule will be absolute." Ethan felt the weight of her words. This was not romance. This was politics, power, and survival. Hers, and perhaps his own people's. Still, he could not simply agree. Marriage was no small matter, especially when billions of lives hung in the balance. "I understand your reasoning, Princess," he said slowly. "But you must understand me. Humans do not marry by command. For us, marriage is choice, trust, and respect. To demand it with a threat is difficult for my people to accept." The nobles laughed harshly. "Hear him. The human speaks of choice, as if he has the power to refuse. Does he not see? He is already trapped. Earth will burn if he resists." Liara's violet gaze sharpened. She stepped down from her throne and walked toward him, each step echoing in the hall. She stopped only a few feet away, her presence like a burning star. "You think you have a choice?" she whispered, low enough that only he could hear. "Do not mistake my offer for kindness. Marry me and your people will live. Refuse, and I will show the galaxy that even a world as young as Earth can vanish in an instant." Her words were calm, but Ethan could hear the tension beneath them. This was more than a display. She needed him for something deeper, though he did not yet know what. Ethan did not flinch. He looked directly into her glowing eyes. "If I am to choose, Princess, then I must understand what I am choosing. You offer me a crown of crystal and chains of fear, which will weigh heavier in time, I wonder." For the first time, Liara's lips curved into a faint smile, sharp, amused, but not cruel. "You are bold, human. Bolder than most of my own nobles." She turned back to the court and raised her voice. The human hesitates. "Very well. I will give him time to think. But let it be known, when the moons of Zynar rise 3 nights from now, I will demand his answer." The nobles roared with excitement, gossiping furiously. Some called Ethan a fool, others admired his defiance. The entire empire would now watch and wait for his decision. Ethan's mission had changed in a single heartbeat. He was no longer a simple diplomat. He was now the center of a storm that could decide the fate of humanity. As the court dispersed, Liara leaned closer once more. Her voice was a soft blade. 3 nights, Captain Cross. Marry me, or watch Earth die. Ethan kept his face steady, but inside, his mind was on fire. He had 3 nights to uncover the truth, to find a path that would save his world without surrendering everything. The ultimatum had been given. The clock had begun to tick, and humanity's future now rested on the answer of one man. The next 3 nights weighed heavily on Captain Ethan Cross. The crystalline halls of the Zenari Palace ship glowed with soft blue light, yet to him they felt like the walls of a cage. Every noble he passed eyed him with amusement or disdain. To them he was not a diplomat but a spectacle, a fragile human caught in a royal snare. Ethan kept walking with his head high, refusing to show weakness. He had survived dangerous negotiations before, but this was unlike anything he had faced. It was not just his life at stake. Billions of humans on Earth depended on his decision. If he made the wrong move, their young species could vanish from the stars before it had even begun its journey. That thought kept him awake during his first night aboard the palace. The stars outside the crystal windows seemed to whisper a question. Will you marry her? Or will you let your people fall? But Ethan was not a man who acted blindly. He needed answers. The following day, he attended a council gathering in the Chamber of Radiance. The nobles sat on high seats arranged in a circle, their glittering robes glowing under the crystal lights. Princess Liara entered last, her violet eyes sweeping across the court. She wore a crown of living crystal that pulsed with light, a symbol of her power. Ethan noticed the way the nobles bowed deeply to her yet whispered behind her back the moment she passed. Their respect was shallow, their smiles were sharp. He understood then. Liara had enemies in her own court. The meeting was supposed to discuss trade between the Zenari and the Thalkesh alliance, but all eyes kept drifting back to Ethan. The human who had been given an ultimatum was far more entertaining than taxes and treaties. One scaled noble leaned toward another and muttered loudly enough for Ethan to hear. The human hesitates because his kind is weak. He will beg for mercy. In the end, Ethan pretended not to notice, but Liara's gaze flickered toward him. For just a moment, her expression softened. When the council ended, Liara summoned Ethan to her private chamber. Her quarters were nothing like the grand halls outside. Instead of crystal walls, the chamber was lined with books, real bound volumes, their pages glowing faintly. The air smelled of spice and metal. A wide window revealed the stars beyond. Ethan studied her carefully. Here, away from the court, she looked less like a cold ruler and more like a young woman burdened by the weight of a crown. You wanted answers, Liara said without looking at him. So ask. Ethan stepped forward. Why me? You could have chosen any noble house in the galaxy, any warrior, any prince. Why threaten humanity just to force me into this? Liara turned, her silver hair catching the light. Because you are human. Because you are underestimated. Do you know what they say of your people? That you are fragile, chaotic, unworthy of the stars. They see you as insects crawling into the light of the galaxy. By choosing you, I defy them all. I show them that my will matters more than their traditions." Ethan frowned. "So this is a game to you? A move on a political board?" Her eyes flashed. "Not a game. Survival. If I show weakness, the Council will strip me of my claim to the throne. My rivals will rise, the Empire will fracture, and then Captain Cross Earth will burn in the flames of that war whether I wish it or not." Her words carried weight. Ethan could see now that the ultimatum was not only about him, it was about her future, her power, and the fragile balance of the Empire. Still, her solution placed him in a trap. "You say you need me to prove your strength," Ethan said. "But what do I gain? What does Earth gain?" Liara studied him with those burning violet eyes. "Protection, power, a seat in the Empire's councils. Your world will not just survive. It will rise beside me. That is my offer." Ethan crossed his arms. "And if I refuse?" Her voice dropped. "Then I will have no choice. I cannot appear weak. If I threaten Earth and then do nothing, I lose everything. Do you understand now, human? My ultimatum binds me as much as it binds you." For the first time, Ethan saw the truth beneath her cold mask. Liara was desperate, not only for power but for respect. She lived in a palace of glittering crystal, yet she was surrounded by enemies. Choosing him was not just a show of defiance, it was her gamble for survival. Before Ethan could respond, the chamber doors burst open. A shadow flickered across the walls as masked figures rushed inside. Their blades glowed with crackling energy. "Assassins!" Liara shouted. Ethan reacted instantly. Training and instinct took over. He grabbed the nearest chair, swinging it into one attacker's chest. The alien stumbled back, shocked that the human fought so fiercely. Another assassin lunged for Liara, but Ethan dove in front of her, blocking the strike with the chair's shattered frame. Sparks lit the air. Guards rushed in moments later, cutting down the intruders. The chamber filled with the smell of burning energy and shattered crystal. When it was over, Liara stood frozen, her violet eyes wide. You shielded me," she whispered. Ethan dropped the broken chair, breathing hard. "What did you expect? That I'd stand aside and let them kill you?" Her lips trembled, then curved into a small, rare smile. "Perhaps I underestimated you, Captain Cross." The guards bowed deeply, shocked by what they had seen. A human had protected their princess when even elite soldiers had faltered. Word of this would spread quickly through the palace. That night, Ethan walked alone along the crystal corridors. He knew what the attack meant. Someone powerful wanted Liara gone. And now, by protecting her, he had placed himself in even greater danger. But something else weighed on him. When he had stood between her and the assassin's blade, he had not thought of politics or ultimatums. He had simply acted. Perhaps there was more to Princess Liara than a cold ruler with a shocking demand. Perhaps she was a leader fighting to survive, just as he was. Still, the ultimatum remained. 3 nights. Marry her, or watch Earth burn. Ethan looked out at the endless stars, his mind racing. If he could uncover the truth behind the plots against her, perhaps he could turn this dangerous game into a real chance for both their peoples. But time was running out, and somewhere in the shadows of the Crystal Palace, enemies whispered and planned their next move. The news spread across the palace like wildfire. A human, one of the fragile newcomers, had thrown himself into danger to shield the princess when even her own guards faltered. By the next morning, every hall and chamber of the Crystal Palace echoed with whispers. "Did you hear? The human saved her." A creature so weak, yet he stood before the assassin's blade. Perhaps there is more to this species than we thought. Ethan heard the whispers but ignored them. He had not acted to impress anyone. He had acted because his instincts demanded it. But now, his simple act of courage had changed the balance of the game. The council gathered the next day in the Chamber of Radiance. Dozens of nobles filled the circle of seats, their jeweled garments glowing. Princess Liara entered first, walking with her head high. The court bowed, though some bent their heads reluctantly. Ethan entered next. Every eye turned toward him. Some glared with hatred, others with suspicion, but a few, just a few, looked with new respect. One noble, his skin marked with golden scales, sneered. "The human pretends to be brave. Do not be fooled. It was luck, nothing more." Another answered, "Luck or not, he stood when others did not. I saw it with my own eyes." Their argument spread until the chamber grew restless. Liara raised her hand, silencing the room. Her voice was clear and sharp. "The human's courage is not in question. What is in question is who sent the assassins. I will have answers." The nobles fell silent. No one dared confess. But Ethan noticed the way several of them avoided her gaze. He had learned enough about politics to see guilt in silence. Later, in a quieter hall lined with crystal pillars, Ethan found himself walking beside Liara. Guards followed at a distance, but the two spoke in low voices. "You saw them hesitate," Liara murmured. "Half the council plots against me. They wait for me to stumble so they can tear the crown from my head." "And the assassins?" Ethan asked. She gave a short nod. "Sent by one of those cowards, no doubt." Ethan studied her carefully. "Then you need proof. If you expose the one behind it, you'll strengthen your claim. And maybe you'll stop needing me as a shield." Liara looked at him sharply. "You are clever, human, but do not forget you are still trapped in my ultimatum. Do not imagine you can escape so easily." Ethan gave a small smile. "Maybe, but if I'm trapped, I might as well make myself useful." That night, Ethan walked the palace alone, listening to the whispers in the halls. Guards and servants avoided his eyes, but he paid close attention. Humans were good at noticing what others ignored. Small patterns, half-spoken words, nervous movements. He learned quickly that one noble, Lord Kale of the Ember House, had been restless since the attack. Kale was known for his pride and for his belief that humans were worthless. More than once, Ethan caught Kale glaring at him across the chamber. The next day, during a council feast, Ethan decided to act. The nobles gathered around long tables of crystal that glowed with soft light. Platters of strange food floated in the air, held by shimmering orbs. Music from feathered musicians filled the hall. Liara sat at the head, her posture regal, but her eyes were sharp, watching every movement. Ethan sat beside her, silent as the nobles boasted of their power and wealth. Then, in a clear voice, he spoke. "In my world, when someone sends cowards to strike in shadows, we do not call it bravery. We call it fear." The hall fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. Lord Kale's face darkened. Ethan continued, his voice steady. "Perhaps here among the stars such things are different, but on Earth we believe true strength is shown by standing in the open, not by sending blades in the dark." Kale slammed his fist on the table, his jeweled rings flashing. "You dare accuse us, human?" Ethan leaned forward. "Did I speak your name, Lord Kale? Strange that you hear it in my words." The court erupted with gasps and murmurs. Liara hid a faint smile behind her cup. Kale's anger betrayed him, and though he denied it fiercely, suspicion spread. Ethan knew he was playing a dangerous game. But this was human defiance at its core. Not brute strength, not endless armies, but the courage to speak when others stayed silent. That night, Liara called him to her chamber again. She studied him with unreadable eyes. "You risked much," she said. "Kale is powerful. His family commands fleets. To accuse him so openly was dangerous." Ethan shrugged. "Sometimes the fastest way to find the guilty is to provoke them." He revealed himself. Now everyone doubts him. Liara tilted her head, a faint spark of amusement in her gaze. "You are reckless, Captain Cross, reckless, and effective." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The stars beyond the window cast a pale glow across her face. She looked less like a cold princess and more like a woman fighting alone against a storm of enemies. Ethan broke the silence. "Tell me something, princess. Why trust me at all? You hardly know me. Why not choose someone else to stand at your side?" Her voice softened. "Because you are human. You are different. You do not follow the same patterns as the others. You surprise me. And that, Captain, is exactly what I need." The next day, another trial awaited them. A council elder demanded that Ethan prove his worth. If he is to stand beside the princess, the elder declared, let him face a test. Words are easy, actions decide truth. The nobles agreed. They wanted to see the human fail. The test was simple but cruel, a puzzle of shifting crystals, a challenge of mind and will. Each piece had to be moved in perfect order, or the puzzle would collapse in a flash of energy. No alien had solved it in years. Ethan studied the puzzle as the nobles watched. His hands moved slowly at first, testing the weight and balance of each piece. The aliens whispered, expecting him to fail. But Ethan remembered his childhood, long nights of fixing broken machines, of solving problems with limited tools. Humans had always survived by thinking differently. Piece by piece, he shifted the glowing crystals, watching their patterns. His mind raced, not in alien logic but in human intuition, and slowly, impossibly, the puzzle began to take shape. Gasps filled the hall as the final crystal locked into place. The puzzle shone with bright light, whole once more. Ethan stepped back, breathing hard but steady. Sometimes, he said, you don't need centuries of tradition. Sometimes you just need a new way of seeing. Liara rose, her voice sharp with triumph. You see, even the weakest species can surprise you. Remember this day. The nobles bowed, their whispers louder than ever. Some were angry, some impressed, but none could deny what they had seen. That night, Ethan stood by the crystal windows staring at the stars. He knew the danger was far from over. Kyle would not forgive him. Other nobles would still plot. And the ultimatum still hung over him like a blade. 3 nights and he must give his answer. Yet something inside him had changed. He had shown the court that humans were not weak. He had defended the princess, defied a lord, and solved a puzzle. None of them could. For the first time, Ethan felt that he was no longer just a pawn in Liara's game. He was becoming something more, a force the court could not ignore. And deep within, a thought began to grow. Perhaps this ultimatum could be turned into something else. Perhaps instead of chains, it could become a bridge. But the nights were passing quickly. Soon the moment of decision would come. The morning of the council's final judgment arrived with a quiet tension that wrapped around the palace like a living shadow. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside the Xenari Empire's crystal halls. Every noble had gathered in the Chamber of Radiance once more, their jeweled robes glinting like fire and ice. At the head of the hall, Princess Liara stood, her violet eyes steady, but Ethan noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. Ethan himself walked beside her, not in fear, but in purpose. The past nights had taught him much. He had defended Liara from assassins, outwitted her enemies with human intuition, and even completed a puzzle that had challenged the Xenari for decades. Yet the ultimatum still hung over him, a sword suspended. By invisible threads, 3 nights and Earth's fate would be decided. The council had prepared a series of trials to test Ethan further, challenges of diplomacy, strategy, and courage. Today, all eyes would watch the human, to see if he was worthy or doomed. The first trial was a test of diplomacy. A group of alien envoys from the neighboring Andari Confederation had arrived, their bodies wrapped in armor of living metal, their eyes glowing a pale green. They presented a problem. 2 minor systems on the fringe of Xenari space were claiming the same resource-rich asteroid. The council demanded that Ethan resolve the conflict in a way that would satisfy both sides without angering the Xenari lords. Ethan listened carefully. He did not rely on alien methods which favored hierarchy and intimidation. Instead, he spoke plainly, clearly, and respectfully to the envoys. If both of your systems claim the asteroid, then neither gains long-term stability. Let us divide access so that both may benefit, while sharing the governance and protection responsibilities equally. This way, no one feels dominated, and all prosper. The envoys blinked in surprise. No alien had ever proposed compromise in this manner. Traditionally, disputes were solved with fleets or duels of authority, but Ethan's words made sense. Gradually, the Andari nodded in agreement. The council murmured among themselves. A human had achieved what centuries of alien negotiation could not. Liara gave him a brief, approving glance. "Impressive," she said quietly. Ethan simply nodded. "Diplomacy is about understanding, not fear," he replied. The second trial tested courage and strategy. The council arranged a duel, not of weapons, but of tactics and skill. Two elite Zenari champions would simulate a battle over a holographic battlefield. Ethan's task was to outmaneuver them, using nothing but wit and observation. The chamber darkened as the holographic battlefield appeared. Tiny models of ships and troops floated above the table. The champions moved first, deploying fleets with speed and precision. Ethan watched, noting patterns in their strategy that even experienced Zenari missed. Then, he acted. Using clever misdirection, feints, and counterattacks, he manipulated the holographic fleets to force the champions into a corner. Each move surprised them, forcing mistakes that would not have occurred against another alien. Finally, Ethan trapped both virtual fleets with a maneuver no Zenari had considered. The chamber erupted in astonishment. Even the princess's fiercest critics were forced to bow their heads slightly in recognition. Liara's eyes sparkled with admiration. "You see, human? Sometimes thinking differently is stronger than brute force." Ethan allowed himself a small, confident smile. "Sometimes, princess, the unexpected is the only way to win." But not everyone was impressed. Lord Kale, still burning with resentment, approached the council in whispered fury. "This human mocks tradition. If he stands beside the princess, he will poison our empire with foolish ideas." Another noble countered, "Or perhaps he has already shown us the truth, that your so-called traditions leave leaders blind and weak." Kale's glare swept over Ethan. The human did not flinch. He had learned in these past nights that courage was as much about presence as action. To show fear now would undo everything he had built. The third trial was perhaps the most personal. Liara asked Ethan to accompany her through the Hall of Memory, a sacred place in the palace filled with holographic recordings of past rulers. Here, every Zenari monarch's achievements, failures, and secrets were preserved. Walking among them was an exercise not only in knowledge but in understanding Zenari culture and leadership. As they moved through the glowing records, Liara spoke quietly. "Most humans would be overwhelmed by this. You are brave, but do you understand the weight of ruling an empire?" Ethan studied the images of rulers who had conquered, negotiated, and survived through centuries of war. "I understand responsibility," he replied, "and I know that courage alone is not enough. Leaders must think clearly, act wisely, and sometimes make sacrifices no one else can bear." Liara's gaze softened slightly. "You have wisdom for your kind. Perhaps that is why I chose you. Not because I wanted a human, but because I saw something in you that my own people do not always recognize." Her words were startling. Ethan had expected fear, threats, or a simple ultimatum. Instead, he saw vulnerability. She was not merely a princess issuing commands. She was a young leader alone in a court of schemers, struggling to prove herself. The final trial awaited. The council demanded Ethan give his answer to the ultimatum. But instead of forcing him to decide immediately, Liara allowed him one last challenge: to demonstrate loyalty, courage, and human ingenuity one final time. The council presented a scenario. A rogue fleet from a distant system had entered Zenari space. It was an aggressive force with technology unfamiliar even to the Zenari. Normally, only a fleet of elite admirals would be trusted to counter it. The test was clear. Ethan had to devise a strategy that would protect both the princess and the empire without conventional weaponry. Ethan studied the holographic star maps. He noted the enemy fleet's weaknesses, patterns in their attacks, and possible traps. But more importantly, he considered what humans had that aliens often overlooked: adaptability, creativity, and the courage to risk everything for survival. He spoke clearly to the Council, outlining a plan to use decoy ships, rapid repositioning, and temporary alliances with smaller factions to neutralize the threat without a full-scale war. His approach was unconventional, but every move relied on logic, understanding, and human ingenuity. As the simulation played out, the Council watched in disbelief. Ethan's strategy worked flawlessly. The enemy fleet was neutralized without major loss, and Xynari honor was preserved. The chamber erupted in applause and murmurs. Even Lord Kale looked uneasy, realizing that the human's mind could not be ignored. Liara approached Ethan then, her violet eyes shining. "You have done more than survive, human. You have proven that your kind is not weak. You are clever, courageous, and unexpected." Ethan nodded. "I have done what I must. But remember, Princess, I still do not answer the ultimatum until I know it will serve both our peoples. I do not act for fear, only for what is right." Her lips curved into a rare smile. "You are stubborn, human. I admire that." The night ended with Ethan standing at the palace window, gazing at the distant stars. For the first time, he felt a true bond forming, not only with Liara, but with the possibilities of what humans could accomplish in the galaxy. He had faced trials, court intrigue, and deadly threats. He had defended a princess, solved impossible puzzles, and outwitted alien logic, and he had survived. The ultimatum still hung over him, but now he knew one thing: humans were not weak. Humans could adapt, survive, and shine in ways no alien expected. And with careful thought, clever strategy, and courage, perhaps he could turn the ultimatum into an opportunity, not just for survival, but for honor, alliance, and perhaps something greater. For the first time, Ethan felt ready to face the final decision. And somewhere in the shadows of the palace, the whispers of plotting nobles continued, unaware that they were about to witness something extraordinary: a human who refused to bend, and a princess learning that strength could take many forms. The sun of Xynar rose slowly over the crystal palace, casting long beams of light that shimmered across the halls like liquid fire. Today was the final day. The council had gathered once more, their faces unreadable, their intentions hidden behind jeweled masks. Princess Liara sat at the head of the chamber, her violet eyes calm but determined. Captain Ethan Cross stood beside her, every sense alert. This was the moment of decision. The ultimatum still hung over him: marry the princess or watch Earth burn. But over the past nights, Ethan had learned much. He had defended Liara, outwitted her enemies, and proved to the Empire that humans were clever, courageous, and unpredictable. He was no longer a pawn. He was a force the Council could not ignore. The Council Elder spoke first, his voice echoing in the Crystal Hall. "Captain Ethan Cross, you have faced trials of diplomacy, courage, and intellect. The Council demands your answer. Will you accept the princess's offer and bind yourself to her and the Xynari Empire?" Ethan looked at Liara. She returned, his gaze with quiet strength, her eyes reflecting the weight of centuries of rulers before her. He could see in her expression that she was not merely testing him. She trusted him. She needed him to act not out of fear, but out of wisdom. He took a slow breath and addressed the council. "I will answer," he said, his voice steady. "But first, I will speak plainly. The ultimatum you gave was meant to show power, to make me fear. But I do not act from fear. I act from principle." The council leaned forward, curious. Even Kale's scales glimmered with tension. Ethan continued, "Humans do not marry for threat alone. We value choice, trust, and respect. If my decision is to bind myself to Princess Liara, it must be a bond of equals, not chains, not fear. Equality, mutual trust, cooperation. That is the way I can serve both her and my people." A hush fell over the chamber. No one expected a human to speak so boldly in front of royalty. The words were simple, but the meaning was extraordinary. Liara stood and approached him. "And if the council refuses this condition?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Ethan met her gaze. "Then I cannot agree. Humanity deserves survival, but not slavery. Trust, not submission." The council murmured angrily, debating. Many had expected fear to dominate him, but instead, he had shown courage and clarity. Some whispered about the human's defiance, others about his wisdom. Kale's expression darkened with rage, but he remained silent, unable to challenge a logic so precise. Finally, Liara raised her hand. "Council of Zenari, you have heard his words. He has risked everything, proven his skill, and protected me. If he stands by me, it will not be as a servant, but as an ally. Will you accept this union, or do you wish to see the Empire weakened? By your own pride?" The chamber fell silent. No one dared oppose her openly. The power of her words, combined with the human's courage, had shifted the balance. Kyle finally spoke, his voice low but tight with anger. I concede. Let it be done. But do not think this human will ever be equal to a Zinari ruler." Ethan did not flinch. He had expected resistance. What mattered now was that Earth would survive, and the council had no choice but to agree. The union was celebrated across the palace. Not a traditional marriage, but a formal declaration. Captain Ethan Cross would stand beside Princess Liara as an equal. Together they would represent both humanity and the Zinari Empire in diplomacy, defense, and governance. It was a bond of partnership, not fear. The palace erupted in whispers, some skeptical, some admiring. Humans had never held such a position among the stars, yet Ethan's courage, intellect, and calm heart had proven that humanity was not weak. Liara approached him after the ceremony, her violet eyes softening. "You have done more than survive, Ethan. You have changed this empire's view of humans, forever. They will never forget your courage." Ethan allowed himself a small smile. "And you have changed my view of leadership, Princess. You are not just a ruler, but a person who carries her people's future on her shoulders. That is a weight even humans struggle to bear." She nodded. "Perhaps that is why we were meant to face this challenge together." Over the following weeks, Ethan and Liara worked to solidify the new alliance. Together, they navigated council, politics, negotiated with alien envoys, and even prevented minor conflicts before they erupted into full-scale war. Ethan's human creativity complemented Liara's strategic mind, forming a team no council member had anticipated. He introduced innovations the Zinari had never considered, combining human diplomacy with alien rituals, introducing shared governance, ideas, and emphasizing trust over fear in negotiations. Slowly, the nobles began to respect him, not because he was a human, but because he was effective. Even Lord Kale, initially furious, came to recognize that Ethan's strategies strengthened the Empire. Though his pride remained intact, Kale learned that courage and ingenuity were not limited to Zinari bloodlines. One evening, after a long day of council meetings, Ethan stood on the balcony of the palace, looking at the stars. Liara joined him, silently. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," Ethan corrected. "Humans cannot do everything alone, and neither can you." She smiled, the faintest curve of her lips. "Perhaps that is why we were chosen, because we can work together, where alone we might fail." Ethan looked at her, thinking of the past nights, the assassination attempt, the trials, the council's skepticism. He had feared the ultimatum would be the end. Instead, it had become the beginning of an alliance, a friendship, and a partnership between two worlds. "I never thought I would stand here in the middle of an alien empire and help save my world through partnership," he said quietly. Liara's violet eyes softened. "And I never thought a human could surprise me so completely. You are clever, brave, and unpredictable. Exactly what the Zinari needed." Word of their success spread beyond the palace. Across the empire, Humans were no longer seen as fragile or unworthy. Traders, diplomats, and soldiers began to look at Earth with respect. The young species had survived its first test in the stars and had triumphed. For Ethan, the victory was more than survival. It was proof of human potential, that courage, wisdom, and a willingness to act differently could turn even the deadliest challenges into opportunity. And for Liara, the victory was a confirmation of her intuition, that strength was not only in tradition or bloodlines, but in choosing allies wisely, even if they came from a fragile world across the stars. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Liara worked together to strengthen the alliance. They traveled to neighboring systems, negotiated trade agreements, and even helped prevent conflicts before they erupted. Every step, humans gained trust, respect, and recognition in the Empire. The final proof of their success came when Kale approached them in private. His expression was less hostile, his voice measured. "You have proven something remarkable, human. Perhaps humans are not as weak as I believed." Ethan nodded. "We are not perfect, Lord Kale, but we survive. And sometimes, that is enough." Kyle gave a slight bow. "I see now that I underestimated your species, and your princess." As the days turned to weeks, the alliance between Earth and the Zenari Empire became a symbol across the galaxy. Humans were no longer insignificant. They were respected, they were valued, and at the center of it all stood Captain Ethan Cross, not a mere pawn, but a representative of humanity's courage and ingenuity, and Princess Liara, whose trust in an outsider had saved not only her rule, but countless lives. Standing together, on the balcony of the palace one night looking out over the glowing stars, Ethan and Liara shared a quiet moment. "You changed the galaxy," Ethan said softly. "And you changed it as well," Liara replied. "Together we made a difference." Ethan nodded. The stars seemed brighter than ever. Humanity had survived, not because of power or weapons, but because of courage, intellect, and the ability to act when others hesitated. They had proved that even the smallest species could shine in the galaxy, and as they looked out into the endless black, both knew that this was only the beginning. Humans had survived the ultimatum. Humans had triumphed. And in the heart of the Zenari Empire, a new chapter of hope, partnership, and mutual respect had begun.